Here's an announcement from APS International Money Transfer and Services. At APS, we offer services such as money transfer, Nuga, Nave Cash, Power Top-Up, mobile phone credit top-up, as well as APS holiday cards. Send and receive money to the Gambia, Senegal, and across Africa from wherever you are on planet Earth. With our unbeatable exchange rate, you can transfer money up to £2,000 at a cost of 99 pence for transaction fee. Download APS application to access our 24-hour services at your convenience with privacy. Enjoy our hassle-free Nuga services with helping purchasing quality food items such as cooking oil, rice, sugar, and other daily provision for friends and families from their favorite shops and supermarkets in the Gambia. With our Nuga services, you can pay with deliver to the beneficiary across the Gambia at their convenience to their doorsteps at no cost. Also available at APS is our Nave Cash Power Top-Up. Send cash power credit from any part of the world to the Gambia to your friends and families to keep the lights on. All you need is a Tucson Cash Power meter number to send it job done. With our mobile phone credit top-up, you can send a top-up or credit to your loved ones right away. With APS Holiday Cash, you don't need to worry anymore. With cash, you can withdraw cash from your debit or credit card, even if you are in up countries in the Gambia. Just get your card handy. Within minutes, your money will be ready for collection across the Gambia with no additional charges. For the details or information, contact APS International on telephone landline number 0044-121-6433003. That's 0044-121-6433003. On our mobile WhatsApp number is 0044-790-4028180. That's 0044-790-4028180. APS International, simply the best. Hello, viewers and listeners. Good evening from Sky Power FM Radio. Once again, we're back here on Sky Power FM Radio with our monthly or every fortnightly program that we usually have here on Sky Power Radio. Tonight, our guest is Mr. Saleh Fumane, who will be taking us through some of the factors or issues regarding domestic violence. Our topic title is Domestic Violence Tonight. Mr. Saleh Fumane, welcome to the program.
Thank you very much, Mustafa, once again for inviting me to a program like this. And the whole community of Leeds are very grateful that your efforts have put together a platform where issues like domestic violence awareness can be discussed. So it is very important that our community is increasing in numbers in this city. It is very important that we come together now and again and look at the kind of issues that are affecting our sustenance here in the UK. So thank you very much, Mustafa, for inviting me once again to this program. And thank you very much to our good listeners and people around the world watching us on Facebook.
Thank you very much, Mr. Mane. It's our topic title tonight is domestic violence.
Yes.
So what is domestic abuse, domestic violence?
Right, and thank you very much. I think it is important that, we sort of understand what is the definition of domestic violence.
Yes.
And for the program, for the purpose of this program, I've come up with two definitions.
Right.
The first one is from Women's Aid, and it's a support service that's it's national, and it supports women who are, experiencing a wide range of social challenges, including domestic violence. And their definition says domestic violence is defined as an incident or pattern of incidents of controlling, coercive, threatening, degrading, and violent behavior, including sexual violence in the majority of cases by a partner or ex-partner, but also by a family member or carer. It is very common. In the vast majority of cases, it is experienced by women and is perpetrated by men. So that's, in a nutshell, that's the definition from Women's Aid. But then I have a more general definition here.
Right.
That there is not much difference between the two, but that's the UK government's definition of domestic violence. And they defined domestic violence as any incident or pattern of incidents of controlling, coercive, threatening behavior, violence or abuse between those aged 16 or over who are or have been intimate partners or family members, regardless of gender or sexuality. The abuse can encompass, but it's not limited to psychological, physical, sexual, financial, and emotional abuse. So these are two definitions. And if you sit back and unpick all of them, it will tell you a lot about what domestic violence means in concept and what it also means in practice.
Right. Is this preventable, Mr. Manes? Can we prevent domestic violence?
Yes, we can prevent domestic violence, but interestingly, domestic violence is in almost every society you can think of in the world. It's, as the two definitions say, mostly it's women who suffer domestic violence. And when they suffer domestic violence, it's often perpetrated by someone they know, a family member, friend, partner, ex-partner, etc. So domestic violence is preventable, but we as a community have to accept that it is a problem in our community.
Right.
Because in the Gambia, for example, it's a taboo to talk about domestic violence. But having said that, there are organizations in the Gambia now that are looking into domestic violence, and their primary function is about domestic violence and promoting domestic violence awareness so that people can know what it means and how to prevent it and how to support each other. And quite often, when people suffer domestic violence, they don't know who to turn to. They don't have a service where to go to. But in the UK here, things have changed over the years.
Right. You think mainly what is the cause to domestic violence, Al?
Domestic violence can be caused by a wide range of factors. And as you've rightly seen, the abuse can be physical, it can be psychological, it can be financial, it can be sexual, it can be honor-based, it can be forced marriage, it can be FGM, it can be a wide range of presentations. But in terms of the causes of domestic violence, sometimes there isn't only just one cause of domestic violence. For example, if somebody was involved in a very difficult marriage and they are unable to get out of the marriage, and knowing for a fact that there is domestic violence involved in the marriage, they are not able to pull out of it. So domestic violence can be caused by another factor where people entrust a child's safety with a family member or somebody they know, only for that person to turn around and abuse them. For example, a big case that happened in the UK that changed the whole, shall I say, the dynamics of domestic violence was the Victoria Kalimbi report. You know, it went to Parliament, and Victoria was a young woman who went through all sorts of abuse, physical, emotional, sexual, etc., until she eventually died. And she died in the hands of those who were responsible for her care. So you can see how domestic violence can be slowly sort of manifested in the family, but nobody is talking about it. Everybody seems to be quiet about it. Even services that were responsible for Victoria's care and education, health, social services were all condemned for not picking up the fact that Victoria was being systematically abused. So there are many causes of domestic violence.
You think, Sal, this can affect our family relationship with being the kids, or the relationship in an aspect of like husband and wife? You think this can affect it?
Oh, definitely. Those affects family life, because in our culture, in the Gambia, for example, if there is something personal going on between the husband and the wife, people tend to keep quiet about it, because by talking about it is shameful, and by talking about it you feel, you know, degraded, and by talking about it you feel, you know, sort of inadequate. So family life is at the center of domestic violence and domestic abuse, actually, because there is a diagnosis in mental health called personality disorder. And there is a very, very clear research upon research has indicated that there's a clear association between a child experiencing systematic domestic abuse to them growing up and experiencing personality disorder. In the beginning in the UK here, personality disorder was not seen as an illness or treatable illness, but things changed over the years. So it's now a condition recognized in mental health. And there is a clear association. I'm not saying all personality disorder patients had been abused as a child, no. But what I'm saying is there's a high proportion of child abuse in people with personality disorder.
Right. How about when it comes to kids, Sal? Like domestic abuse and violence, you know, does it reflect on kids as well?
It does. It does. For example, again, this is psychology. The psychology of systematic and continuous abuse in the family, especially if it's directed towards the child. So what happens is the child grows up in a very sort of violent family environment. And when they grow up to become an adult, you know, they would pick up some of the violence as a norm, you know, and they can manifest you know, very, very challenging behaviors in school. They can manifest very, very challenging behaviors in town. So yes, it can affect, you know, how the child perceives life and how the child interacts with other people, because eventually some children, having sustained domestic abuse for a long, long time, can grow up with this idea that domestic violence is normal and this is how I would, you know, continue to live my life. So it can affect the child's thinking, it can affect the child's behavior, and it can affect the child's engagement with people. Some young girls who had been through domestic violence in mental health can experience problems with relationships, because they will have difficulty trusting people. Because sometimes in the middle of domestic violence is the key factor, which is trust. So some trust had been broken. You know, this is why the abuse was allowed to sort of go on and on and on. And in some cases, abuse can be present in the family for many, many, many years without anybody talking about it. And it can happen in institutions. We have seen on television and radio now and again, you know, historical abuse being mentioned, historical abuse being brought to court, historical abuse being prosecuted. So domestic violence is, as I said earlier, it's in the middle of every growing society, whether we like it or not. And I think what is important is that, you know, people talk about it, because the more we talk about it, the more confident we would come about it.
Yes. Because, you know, I think, you know, that's what I was coming to, Sal. You know, some of these issues or these factors that escalate this, it's like not talking about it. Yeah. Because, you know, if there is no conversation about many of these things, you know, it can develop into something else. What do you think?
Definitely. As I said, it affects people's social maturity. It affects people's physical maturity, because some kids, as a result of domestic abuse, can grow to become, you know, a kid for many, many years. Even in their adulthood, they'll be perceiving life as a kid, you know, especially if they had been systematically abused. Let me recap one of these statements here. It says women are more likely than men to experience multiple incidents of abuse, different types of domestic abuse, intimate partner violence, sexual assault, and stalking, and in particular sexual violence. Any woman can experience domestic abuse, and it's regardless of race, ethnic or religious group, sexuality, class, or disability. But some women who experience other forms of oppression and discrimination may face further barriers to disclosing abuse and finding help. So that's a big problem. People, some women will be very quiet about this. They would think, well, they're going to put everybody around them to shame by talking about the abuse they are experiencing in a relationship, for example. So clear from evidence, women are more likely than men to experience domestic abuse.
Yeah, is it because women are fragile or what? Why is that?
Well, we know very well when it comes to women's makeup, that is their, biological makeup.
Yeah.
Women are weaker than men. Physically, men tend to be in more advantageous positions than women. So when domestic violence is involved in the relationship, the man in the relationship would take that weakness as an advantage and then, capitalize on it and then continue to sort of intimidate. Remember, domestic abuse can be psychological, it can be financial, it can be emotional. So some men who are in power over the woman can capitalize on the excess power and continually intimidate the woman up to a point where they break down. And sometimes when people are experiencing domestic violence, it's not uncommon, for example, for women to report being depressed, to report being very worried, to report being very anxious, to report being not being themselves, in terms of, functioning. So it is important that, as I said earlier on, we as a community in the Gambia, it's very difficult to sort of have a forum where people can talk about, domestic violence openly. But as I said, there are some organizations in the Gambia now who look at gender violence specifically, and something is being done about it. The fact that there is some, general mental health awareness around domestic abuse is a big step forward. So we need to sort of talk about abuse, because we know for a fact, as the statement says, women, for example, who suffer abuse don't tend to seek help or don't tend to identify where help is.
That is, of course, I'm thinking, Sal, that must be a real cause of concern, because anything that's going to affect our family relationship and friends or kids, is something that could be a cause of alarm.
Yes.
So I'm just wondering, why is it that people don't want to talk about it?
Well, as I said, our culture and tradition puts the man first, if you think about it, and our religion. So women generally in our communities go through a wide range of challenging times in their lives, whether they are married or not married. If you look at the fabric of our society, if you look at how our society is composed, and if you look at how our local society functions, and if you look at how our local society organizes itself around all the social activities, generally speaking, men overpower women in many sort of areas in our society. So it is that power difference or that power gap that tend to give men advantage over women. Some men are very reasonable about living, amicably with a woman under the roof, but some men are not, whether it's home or away or in the streets. And one of the key elements that tend to exacerbate domestic violence in families around the UK, for example, quite often drug and alcohol is involved, in the relationship. So the man, for example, can have issues with alcohol and can become aggressive and violent towards the woman. So that's a common sort of pattern in the societies like in the UK.
True, Sal. Coming to that, there is a colleague of mine. She's in the media fraternity as well, and then she's called Famata Koka. She's running the Elite Empire Media. She's the host, and she's got a question for you. And then I would like to put her on live if that's okay. I think she's got a question for you.
Okay, thank you.
Yes. Hello, Famata. Can you hear me?
Yes, it's breaking. I can hear you now.
Yeah, good. I'm here. You're live now.
Okay, thank you. Hello, good evening, everyone.
Good evening, Fatumata.
Hi, Somali. How are you?
I'm good, thank you. And yourself?
Thank you very much. And thank you very much for inviting me on your platform today.
Right.
I'm very grateful.
Okay.
This program today touched my heart, and I think it touches everybody's heart anyway. And I've got a few questions to ask because from a woman's point of view.
Yes.
Yes, domestic violence has been here for a long time, and it looks like it's here to stay. It's decreasing, not even it's decreasing, especially in Africa.
Mm-hmm.
Obviously, in the West, you can't just abuse someone just like that. As you said, I remember that there's a Victoria case a long time ago in the UK.
Yes.
It was huge, and I think that was when the British took it to another level to try to stop something like that from happening.
That's right.
It was so big. I remember that. But, but what I want to ask is, being in the West is different from being in Africa.
That's right.
And now we know the problems, and it has been identified why you point field traffic and how these things happen and how kids grow up with this domestic violence, and it changed their lives. I mean, some of us who are married now today, some of these problems that we're facing is what we grew up with. It's to do with domestic violence, and we don't even know.
Mm-hmm.
Now, I just want to ask you a few questions.
Yes.
Like, what can we do to help our people back in Africa? Because we have tried so many ways of helping.
Mm-hmm.
It's not working.
Mm-hmm.
Reason being is the culture and the religion.
That's right.
The culture and the religion is the biggest reason why we can't do that.
Mm-hmm.
Because if you're in Africa and you're being abused, they wouldn't even want you to talk about it.
That's right.
They wouldn't want you to talk. So what can we do about that?
That's a very good question, Fatoumata, and thanks for joining us in this program. And what can we do about the presence of domestic violence in our communities? We know for a fact that there is domestic violence in our communities, and we know for a fact that people are not empowered enough to speak about it or to talk about it, even at a friendship level, family level, or at a national level. So what we need to do is we need to conduct local community domestic abuse awareness programs in the local villages and towns. We need to be very, very open about it. We need to tell people that, look, today we are talking about an issue that's killing us, that's setting us apart. We want you to be aware that it is common in almost maybe 1 in every 4 families experience domestic violence in an African context. In the UK here, the statistics are alarming. For example, last year, police recorded 464,886 cases of domestic abuse in England and Wales. So there had been an increase of 10% on the previous year. That's according to the crime survey. And in an African context, in the Gambia, we don't have these figures. So if the figures were revealed one day, it would be alarming in terms of, knowing that this is what is happening in our communities. So I think it is about educating all of us about domestic violence. Those who are in a position with the wealth of knowledge and experience and work with people who suffer domestic violence, including the police, local communities, the alkalolo, the imams. They need to come together in a local way. We need to go into local communities. We need to go into schools and say, look, if you are experiencing this kind of abuse at home, it's not the norm at all. Don't be manipulated by the situation at home. Think that domestic violence is normal. It's not normal at all. How you need to break yourself away from it is for you to come to, some teaching and education about it, to learn about what is it, what kind of domestic violence are you experiencing at home? How can you set yourself free from it? Because domestic violence, know it or not, it enslaves an individual within their local context. And when people are enslaved by domestic violence within their local context, they find it extremely difficult to set themselves free from, from the slavery. Because, there is quite often financial abuse, sexual abuse, physical abuse, emotional abuse, and all sorts of, if you combine those abuses together, over a period of time, they would destroy the child. They would destroy the child's behavior. They would destroy how the child thinks and they would destroy the child's life opportunities. So this is a very, very big issue in our community, but it has to start from the local community level. Even in Islam, I'm not very fluent in Islam, but it's very, very clear in Islam. Islam doesn't forgive the perpetrator at all of domestic abuse. Islam doesn't promote domestic abuse at all. But we have to get imams involved in terms of promoting, domestic violence awareness, because sometimes the family you think is not experiencing domestic violence is the very family that is sat with a wide range of domestic violence. So that kind of local community awareness, local community promotion, and schools interventions needs to be in the framework.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, thank you. And I want to add to what you just said, because I think this is the difficulties that women are facing in Gambia and kids, because they feel that if they are abused, it is normal, it's okay.
Yeah.
They should just keep quiet about it.
Exactly.
And obviously, religious leaders, elders, and family members who put a block to it, they won't even allow you to talk about it, because they will just say, "Oh, it's normal, just forget it, just leave it. He's part of the family, she's part of the family," and this will not help at all.
No.
That's why this is increasing.
Yeah.
Like, for instance, recently, I know for a fact that women will not speak out. They've been raped by their husbands. And we Africans do not understand that we are like a woman can be raped by a husband.
Yeah.
If you say no to your husband, it's a no.
Yeah.
If you say no to your husband, it's no.
Yeah.
When he continue doing what he has to do, it's rape. And this should be, we should be educated about this.
Yes.
It should be put out there.
Yeah.
But our people we don't want to accept it.
Yeah.
We fail to understand this point, because we feel, oh, you're a woman, that is your husband, it's okay, whatever he wants to do, he can do to you. Because some people are married to their partners, but they're not really in love. It's a forced marriage. It's an arranged marriage, things like that.
Yeah.
So it's a stage whereby they don't even want to have any sexual intercourse with you.
Mm.
So if you carry on doing what you're doing,
Yeah.
it means you are raping them.
Yes. Oh, yes.
It goes to the level of abusing your wife to having to go to bed with her. So we should address all these situations, because these are sensitive issues, like we want to call it.
Yeah.
It is sensitive. But for how long are we going to look at these issues as being sensitive?
Yeah.
We need to be educated on these issues.
Yes. Oh, definitely.
Yeah, I want to beg our elders and the religious leaders and our family members that they should allow women and kids to open up and talk.
Yeah.
We should give them the chance to talk, to express themselves.
Yeah.
If someone is doing something to you that is not right, we should know them from let them talk about it.
Mm-hmm.
Make them know that it is not right, it is not allowed. That should not be done to them.
Yes.
But how do you, now I want to ask you, how do you talk to those people, like the religious leaders, our elders, and how do you talk to them?
Yeah.
For them to understand that this shouldn't carry on. It should stop. It's an abuse. Abuse is abuse.
Yeah. Well, we have to meet them in their homes. I've done mental health awareness in the Gambia at local community level, and it's amazing how many people tend to turn up to listen to what is being discussed. So we have to have women forum in almost every local community, really, to say, look, the purpose of this forum is to give women specifically space to come and talk about domestic violence without feeling, persecuted. So,
can I come in, sir? Sorry about that. I feel, yes, women forum is good enough, but I think a guy like you, should, like, for you have the knowledge, the understanding.
Yeah.
You need to educate some of the guys. Let them meet up with the elders. Let them meet up with regional leaders.
Yeah.
Let them talk to them. Because I think we should start this should start with speaking to the elders, especially guys.
Yes.
They should understand and know that women cannot be abused.
Yeah.
Kids cannot be abused.
Mm-hmm. Yes.
I think it should start from them. Because as women, we are abused.
Yeah.
We understand that.
Yes.
But how about those abusing them? Do they really understand that they shouldn't abuse us?
Exactly.
They don't understand.
Yeah. I think there are two things here. Men who abused women, they abuse them intentionally. It's not accidental, because we're talking about men and women who have been together for a long time. well, 3 months is a long time. 1 month is a long time. You know, what tends to happen is the trust between the woman and the man is broken by the man, because we know for a fact it's women who generally tend to be the abused. So the abuser, if you look at our culture, tradition, and religion, tends to be on the abuser's side. So that needs to shift. There's a big disempowerment of women when it comes to the equation, looking at the equation, you know, the woman's side and the men's side. If you look at it traditionally, if it got to traditional level, like the head of the compound, they would dismiss the woman's claim immediately. If the woman claimed that she had been raped, they would say, well, our definition of rape, this is not rape at all. This is someone who you live with under the same roof. He has every right. This is how they are going to translate it. This person has got every right over you. And that's not the case at all. And we tend to say, let's empower women. I think, you know, we need to go beyond empowering women. Women need to understand that they have a right to get out of an abusive relationship. But what tends to keep them there are a combination of social factors, which you can understand. But men too, they must be educated. We need to have men's forum as well to educate them about what is violence. Because some men would think, well, this is my right to beat my woman up. You know, some women beat their women up almost every week, you know. You know, some people, some women, some men seize the advantage of being the powerful one in the house to take absolute control. And when I say absolute control, physical control, emotional control, financial control, everything over the woman. So the woman becomes speechless, becomes helpless, becomes so disempowered, they become depressed, they don't have energy anymore to fight back. So we at the front line need to go into all these homes together, bring them together, and as you rightly said, talk to the imams and say, look, you know, your religion, you are the master of our religion. Our religion doesn't promote this kind of abuse. Can you come out and condemn it openly? We'll go to teachers and say, look, you know, this is how you recognize a child who is being abused. And if you recognize that they are being abused, this is how you need to help them. This is how you need to encourage them to speak out. We need to have this women's forum so that, you know, at some point, all these forums will come together and say, look, the subject is domestic abuse. What is our understanding of it? How can we prevent us going through it and from going through it systematically and continuously? Because whether or not we know it, domestic violence is responsible for the damage of many young people's future. Because what you do is investing into a family is a key investment. It's more valuable than money. But if you invest wrongly into a family, the output you get is a disengaged family, is a dysfunctional family, and the final product is you have children who are confused, who don't know what to do, and who see violence as, you know, a norm, and it is not a norm at all. So there's a lot of education and inter-education that needs to happen really for us to continually, it is not going to be a one-off thing, it needs to be continually be brought up to the front line, continuously, until people who had been listening for 10 times are now able to go out and preach people about how to prevent themselves from domestic violence.
Thank you, Mr. Mane. The last thing I want to say is, you hit the nail when he said you have to do main forum as well. It's very important.
Yes.
Because to be honest with you, most of the cases that we see, we just say that, okay, women are being abused, women are being abused. These men, we need to look into why they abuse women as well.
Yes.
Because sometimes it's not they're doing it because they want to do it. They're doing it because, they have been abused or they are sick or mental issues, you know, a lot of stuff. You have to do background check on those who abuse women.
Mm-hmm.
You have to do that. And I just want to add on again that women and kids should not be afraid. They should come out and speak about these things. And I'm so happy that we have platforms that are ready to take this on, because these are things that in the past that we will not come out here and talk about. And we should no longer live in fear, thinking that, okay, I cannot tell people that my husband is abusing me, or my brother is abusing me, or my father, or the neighbor is abusing me.
Yeah.
We have to talk about it. If it means you have to even go to the authorities and tell them, please do so.
Yes.
Because these people are living in fear. They don't want to talk about it.
Yes.
Because they feel like if they do, As a wife, you'll be like, all right, you'll be called the bad wife. You know, all sorts of names. You'll be called all sorts of names. As a child, you'll be the bad child.
Yeah.
So they should come out and start talking about it, because if they don't, can you imagine how many people are there silent about this? Some of them end up taking their lives, and we don't even know about it.
Exactly.
So this, this has to stop. And I'm so happy that you people came up with this program today. It is very important. And yes, I just want to say to the viewers, if you please can share this video, because it can go as far as you don't even think. And people that are in Gambia, if even one person is listening, please, can you record this on your WhatsApp and send it to people, because it's very important for people to be educated about things like this. But domestic violence abuse is not even allowed. Let's just put it that way. It's not allowed.
Yeah.
We should not allow it. We should not accept it.
Yeah.
And we need to start with the people in the rural area and teachers. And the saddest thing, sorry, Mr. Mane, is the people that we trust the most are the people that are abusing us.
Exactly. Yeah. Oh, yeah.
It is so sad.
Yeah.
And I thank you very much. I thank both of you for inviting me.
Yeah.
Sorry, I took so much of your time.
Well, before you go, I can just recap one or two things. Because clearly, in this violence, there are two parties. That's the abuser and the abused. And there is a lot of research that points to the fact that if a child had been abused systematically over the years, there's a good potential that they can turn in the future to be an abuser. So you can see how, abusing a child or the presence of domestic violence in the family, how it can escalate onto future generations, So this is why it is extremely important. But one of the elements we need to bring into the discussion as well is the fact that legislation and prosecution, we need to find out, we need to have figures about how many cases in the Gambia have been successfully prosecuted. We need to find out, and we need to find out how strong is the legislation. Is there legislation specifically about zero tolerance, domestic violence? And if it isn't, how do we educate the politicians to come to the forefront so that this becomes a national issue? Because it's a national problem that needs a national concerted effort to tackle it.
And I take this opportunity to remind people, that, especially young girls, that it is not all right for your teacher to touch your breast, touch you anyhow, and for you to think that, okay, that's my teacher, it's okay for him to do it, I need to have high grades. It's not okay for your father, your brother, your family members to touch you anyhow. It's wrong. Don't think that, okay, they can do it because that's my dad, he can touch my breast or he can touch my bum and stuff like that. And again, the one that people expect is women do abuse women as well. Women do abuse the kid, the child.
Yes.
They do. And these signs are there, and I think we should talk about this because it's happening a lot in Africa.
Yeah.
People just know they're thinking like, oh, that's a woman and I'm a woman. It's okay if they touch my breast. No. There is a sign of sickness there, and we should stop it. So thank you very much. I'll leave you guys to finish up with the program.
Thank you, Farid.
Right, just stay there for a minute. I'll get in touch, later. Just stay there for a sec. I'll come back to you in a minute. Yeah. No, stay there on live. Stay there on Facebook. I'll come and get in touch. Yeah.
Should I come out of the WhatsApp now?
Yeah.
All right.
Thank you very much. Thank you. Okay. Thanks for that. Okay. Yeah. So like Sal, like he clearly mentioned. So what are you thinking? You think religion and culture is something that is causing this? You think?
Well,
an impact on
this? If we are looking for solutions, we need to bring in religion.
Yeah.
We need to bring in culture, and we need to bring in traditions, so that we can, have an open debate about the issue. But as we said, Fatma and I agree that this is a family community-based problem, and it needs to be tackled by all those people, within that, setup really, for any change to happen. Just quickly again, just to remind people about the level of abuse. In the UK, for example, 13.6% of men and 26.3% of women aged 16 to 59 have experienced domestic abuse since the age of 16. So in the UK here, we are talking about the UK here,
yes.
but if you look at the picture in the Gambia, especially the unreported ones, the ones who are silent, they've been silent for many years, being systematically abused and cannot report it. Can you imagine the kind of psychological damage that's going to do?
Yeah, because, you know, in the Gambia back home, I don't think there's such kind of databases, you know, like of things, you know, that what happens when it comes to domestic abuse.
Yeah.
But like engaging the communities in what aspects, Saleh?
Well, we can use the mental health platform, for example, to engage with the communities. We can go into the communities and conduct a mental health awareness. And part of the mental health awareness would be to encourage people to look at issues around domestic violence. We can say, for example, do you understand domestic violence? If you do, how do you experience domestic violence in your own family home? How does it manifest itself? Or what are the causes of domestic violence in your own setting? For example, we need to promote types of domestic abuse so that people know what is domestic, because some people would think that's normal. They would just get on with life, you know. And we need to encourage people to look at signs of domestic abuse. If a child is being abused domestically, they are the sort of these are the sort of things we need to be looking for example, when they go to school or when they are playing with their own mates. How do they engage with them? Do they engage with them in a violent way? Or do they talk to them in a violent way? Are they able to sort of have friends at all? Or do they feel isolated? Are they not very... Because domestic violence, if experienced by a child, can turn them to be mute meaning, you know, not able to express themselves. So that's important. These are signs we need to look for, and indicators of domestic violence in children. We need to be looking for them. We need to look at effects of domestic abuse. Domestic abuse has immediate effects, medium-term effects, and long-term effects. And if you put all of them together, they do long-term damage. So this is why the earlier people intervene and have an open discussion about domestic violence, the better for all members of the family, really, and members of the community. Reporting domestic abuse is a very, very difficult one. And how do we support victims? And we need to find solutions in terms of, you know, helping, you know, women who suffer with domestic abuse. We can say, look, you know, for example, if you went to this kind of organization, they would talk to you in private, and whatever you said would be confidential, and you know, nothing would go out of the room. They would support them. But I think from a national point of view, we need to have legislation. In the UK here, there's legislation for domestic violence. In the Gambia, we need to find out if there is legislation for domestic violence in the Gambia. How does it operate? You know, how many people has it supported who have been abused? So both the abused and the abuser, we need to bring them together and educate them about the fact that this thing that is between them, that's called abuse, is not on. So there should be a zero tolerance to domestic abuse.
You think we can prevent this, or friends and families from there, you think?
Domestic violence is preventable, but the whole family setup need to have that kind of open discussion and open debate. If somebody recognizes an abuse, they will have the confidence to report it. Because if people don't have the confidence to report domestic abuse, then it means, you know, it is going to be alive, you know, in the family continuously. So people have to be given the confidence that if I talk about being abused domestically, it's not going to destroy me, it's not going to destroy my family. It's all part and parcel of our social welfare, and our social welfare is such that we need to support each other and we need to recognize what is affecting our daily life.
You think this issue of like hierarchy of leadership, you think that would that not be like a factor affecting this? Because like the husband might be thinking he's the head of the family, the dad might be thinking he's the head of the family, and he has the final say. And if you want to challenge that, you know, that might cause a bit of friction. What do you think, Sal? It
would cause friction, but at the end of the day, though, our main aim is to make everybody around, all families around, to accept the fact that there is domestic violence in our families, there is domestic violence in our communities. Then before you look into a problem, you have to accept that there is a problem. So we need to accept that domestic violence is a problem, and we as a community, we are prepared to come together and talk about it openly and put together systems, procedures, and avenues that would support people who are experiencing domestic violence. We know for a fact that domestic violence is there. No one can refuse, the fact that domestic violence, and sometimes it's down to definition, interpretation, and management. Because what some families might think is not domestic violence is actually domestic violence. Like Fatma said earlier on, if a man engaged in sexual activity that the woman has not consented to, even though they are married, is interpreted by law in this country as rape. But is it interpreted by law in the Gambia as rape? So these are the sort of things we need to be able to talk about openly and say, look, men and women, let's come together. We know we have a problem. The problem is called domestic violence. It's breaking some families down. It's endangering the future opportunities of many young people. So this is why it is important that we tackle it now before it escalates to an unmanageable level.
How to manage this, Sal, I think might be a bit of an obstacle here, because looking at it, our tradition and our religious belief is, you don't think that might be an impact?
Yes. Well, this is why we need to draw the imams, the alkalulu, the sefulu, the commissioners, the ministers. We need to draw their attention to the fact that we want to champion zero tolerance and domestic violence in families, but we cannot do that alone. It has to be a community collective effort. So it's a very, very sensitive subject. Some people might turn around and say, well, these people they don't know what they are talking about. They are talking rubbish. And it's not rubbish.
That's something
some people would be dismissing what we are saying. But what is very, very key though, if anyone listening to this program, for example, sat back and think and reflect, they would recognize one or two forms of domestic violence, either they themselves in the past had gone through, or someone they knew who had systematically gone through domestic violence and how it left them paralyzed. When people experience domestic violence, it can make some people very, very strong. It can make their coping strategies very, very strong, because eventually they will come out very, very strong. But for many, many people, the experience of domestic violence at an early age can destroy their future life. So this is how bad it is.
Right. You think this is achievable?
In terms of promoting it?
Yes.
And promoting communities to stop. It is. It is achievable. What we need to do is, and we need to put in place strategies, activities that promote, zero tolerance domestic violence. Then we need to look at how can we conduct a small piece of research to give us a clue, for example, about what's the level of domestic violence present in Sukuta, for example. We can say how much of domestic violence is present in Gunjur, who is actually the abuser, who is the abused. So we can conduct small pieces of research, or the government can take this up as a priority, for example, and say, look, we want to have an understanding of the magnitude and nature of domestic violence in our society. But how do we do that? We need to go out and look for what the problems are, the kind of domestic violence. We know there can be different types of domestic violence: physical violence, psychological violence, emotional violence, financial violence. But we want to have a specific understanding of domestic violence in a Gambian context.
Right, because when you look at it in the Gambian context, personally, the way I see it, it might take a while. We'll get there eventually, but it might take a while. You need to involve that many people, traditional leaders,
yes,
imams, and some people. Do you think some people even know domestic violence is happening in the Gambia?
No, I tell you one thing. I mean, if you mention this in the middle of a big town in the Gambia, you'll say, what is this person talking about? Does he know what he's talking about? We don't have domestic violence here. Domestic violence has no place here. Domestic violence is in Saudi Arabia. Domestic violence is in the Gambia. It's in Mali. It's in Senegal. It's everywhere. As we said earlier on, in terms of looking at, it says any woman can experience domestic abuse regardless of race, ethnic or religious group or sexuality or class. So it's everywhere. the ones who are prepared to accept it and talk about it are the ones who are in a position to explore it further. But the ones who are dismissive about the presence of domestic violence in our communities are the ones who really don't want to talk about it, and they just want domestic violence to continue to happen in our societies. It is there as a matter of fact. There's no denial at all. This is another problem, though. Some people will be experiencing domestic violence, but they'll be denying that it is happening at all. So we need to change.
Because they are scared of the.
Yeah, they are scared. They are scared of feeling that they are a menace to the family, because if you report to people all the time that you are getting beaten up by your husband, you are depressed because of the way your husband is treating you at home, you are depressed because you cannot manage the children anymore because they are experiencing all sorts of abuse from the father, for example, people will be terrified. Some people have got a very, very thin threshold in terms of coping. Some people's coping styles are better than others. So we need to empower women to understand that they are being abused. And once they recognize that they are being abused, we need to say to them, look, the next level is take this person to court, or, this is beyond the family now. Then we can know, for example, how many domestic violence cases in the Gambia had been reported and how many actually had led to prosecution, or how many actually had been thrown out by the courts. So we need to have all that information.
Do you think men, Fatma is asking, do you think men abuse as well? Men get abused as well, men?
Oh, yes. The abuse can be the other way around as well. Abuse sort of directed from the woman to the man. But clearly, most research put the woman ahead of the man in terms of the abused. So women are more likely to be abused than men in a given relationship.
Right. Sal, looking at it this way, would I say the awareness is something that is lacking?
Well, I can confidently say that there is very, very little awareness about domestic violence in the Gambia. I mean, what I would like to see, for example, the Gambia is divided into regions. It would be very, very interesting if we had domestic violence groups in every region, and for them to promote domestic violence and say, look, domestic violence should be zero tolerance. We are here to give people the platform to come out and talk about their domestic violence. Over a period of time, all those regional groups can come together and look at it from a national level. You would not be surprised at all if they shared same stories, if they shared similar experiences, and what the kind of abuse a woman at the right end of Basse reported might be similar to the kind of abuse a woman in Sukuta, Serakunda, Kanifing, or Bakau reports as well. So I think it would be very, very interesting in terms of tackling domestic abuse or domestic violence in the Gambia, if it can be regionalized, so that we know what kind of reports are coming from each and every region about the kind and level of domestic abuse that's being experienced by members of the different communities.
Yeah, coming to that, Sal, you think the tribal bit as well, you don't think that's a factor?
No, the tribal bit is there as well, because in the Gambia, whether or not you know it, certain tribes have been accused of being, more sort of overpowering when it comes to a family relationship, and that should not happen at all. I mean, we are in the 21st century, and what we need to do is, we need to embark upon an education mission. We need to embark upon an intervention mission, and we need to embark upon an ambassadorial mission whose primary function and purpose is to look at domestic violence in a Gambian local context. And I think this is why, if the issue was regionalized, then we would have a better picture, really, so that we don't say, well, domestic violence is only confined to families in West Coast Combo region, for example. But people in the URR, for example, Basse area, can also report domestic violence, and they may be similar and they may be dissimilar, So, but we need to have a good picture of it. We need to have a good feeling of it. At the moment, we are talking about domestic violence in the Gambia, for example, but after this program, I'll try and work out some connections in terms of finding out what figures are there in the Gambia that state very clearly what the, domestic violence is and how many people over a period of time experience domestic violence in our society, and where does that violence get taken to. If it gets taken to the cadre, for example, I think all that they would do would be to sort of mediate and, let people go and be happy. But I think what is important is if there is very clear evidence of domestic violence that can be prosecuted, should be prosecuted really, so that people can become aware of the fact that domestic violence is part of our legislation. And if you broke this part of our legislation, this is the prosecution sort of the kind of prosecution that would follow.
Right. How about the government? You think, Sal, the government is doing anything about it? Do you think the government need a part to play in this?
They've got an extremely important part to play in domestic violence. The government is, our own people, and we put them in power, and they need to look at all issues that are affecting us. Domestic violence is part of mental health, because if you look at domestic violence, when people are abused domestically, no doubt at all, you don't have to conduct a piece of research about that. Present in that family will be depression. And present in that family would be depression that can escalate to severe depression, and would be depression that can escalate to suicidal ideation, and would be depression that can escalate to physically conducting suicide. So some people who experience domestic violence systematically potentially can go on to kill themselves. I don't know the figures in the Gambia, so it would be interesting too to look at, how many people over a period of time committed suicide as a result of domestic violence. So the government has a role in this, because when you look at legislation and prosecution, the government is central to those elements. So we need to bring them into the equation. We need to engage the government's health committee, for example, to look at domestic violence as a separate issue and as an issue that needs to be incorporated into all of its mental health agenda. And they need to identify the fact that domestic violence is present. So how do we manage it?
On that note, Sal, if I've got a few more to ask, or I would say, have you got anything else to say or any other thoughts?
Well, I was going to mention how the UK, for example, went about in terms of looking for solutions. And what they did was the government made domestic issue everyone's business. So when we promote domestic violence awareness in the Gambia, we need to, the key message needs to be domestic violence is everyone's business. So the consultation would be wide-ranging. It would include every cross-section of our society, men, women, young children, boys and girls, because we want boys who are going to school to understand, and girls who are going to school to understand the fact that there should be zero tolerance domestic violence in the family. And if anybody experiences anything, please have the confidence to report it to your teacher or to report it to your friend, so that that friend can carry your message to somebody else who is away from the family. And if it is going to lead to prosecution, we need to give people the confidence that what you have reported now can lead to prosecution. So people need to be involved in the whole sort of consultation, organization, and planning of domestic violence and promotion in the Gambia.
Right. Yes, I think Famata has got something else to say. But before we got that, any final thoughts, Sal?
Well, my final thoughts are: look, we are in the 24th century. Domestic violence depletes the family's power. It paralyzes the young person's future, and domestic violence is everyone's business. We should not accept, we should not tolerate being abused at all. the persons who abuse must understand the fact that the power they are exercising should be limited, really. They should not take it over and above what is required. So people who abuse need to come together. We need to bring them together, whether they are known abusers or unknown abusers, for us to say to them, look, domestic abuse affects every fabric of society, and domestic abuse, if you let it happen over a period of time, it causes more damage than good.
Right. On that note, I think before we go anywhere, Famata is here once again. I think this is something that I would say is this is very dear to her, and she must get some more comments, to put on to add on to this.
Yes.
Yes, Famata, if you can hear me now, Salifu is here ready for you. Your thoughts and his thoughts, and then our final thoughts.
Can you hear me?
Yeah, I can hear you loud and clear. Can you?
Yes, I can hear you. Oh, yes. Thanks once again. Thank you very much for inviting me. Yes, I think we should really involve authorities in this. So we can't do this without the authorities in Gambia.
Yeah.
We have to work together as a team. Like you said, it's a collective effort. And family members, they're the key people into this. They have to support the person that's been abused.
That's right.
If you don't support the person that's been abused, it can, take their confidence away from them. It can, lower their self-esteem, and it can, when they grow up, it can do something else, like we said from the beginning. So I think people should be supported in this. Like if someone tells you that someone's abusing me, you should listen carefully, and we need to start listening to our children. We have to listen to them. It's not everything that they say is a lie or is a made-up story. They're fabricated. No, we have to start listening to them, and this is one of our main problems in Africa. We don't listen to kids.
Yes.
Especially for those women that came into a relationship with another child. When you come into a relationship, because you're so much in love or involved in the relationship, you tend to believe what your partner tells you always about the other child. Because that's not his child. You get to an extent where you keep saying to the child that, oh, you just want me to end my marriage, you're jealous, I'm not with your dad, and you won't even believe what your child is telling you about what's going on in their life. We need to start listening to our kids. We need to start listening to women. Even the men, we need to start listening to them. A man can, men, normally they are very shy. They will never come up and tell that I'm being abused at home. I'm being abused by my wife, I'm being abused by my father, I'm being abused by it's very rare for you to hear guys coming out to say that. And like I said, we have to look at the possible signs. As for kids, like I told you before, the people that we trust the most are the people that tend to abuse these people.
That's right.
Like, for instance, even as an old grown woman, you can be abused by the person that you trust the most. You can go to a guy thinking that you are there telling him your stories, what's going on in your life, your doctor. It could be anyone. It could be a religious leader. It could be anyone. You go to them, confide in them, and at the end, they start abusing you. They start taking advantage of a situation right there. And we should be able to identify all of these things. And like you said, it's zero tolerance. Zero tolerance. We can't have this going on anymore.
No.
We're in the 21st century, like you said. We have to put an end to this. But how do we put an end to this? It takes the community. We have to work together with them. Sensitizing them is not enough. Once we have to continuously doing it. And programs like this, I would encourage that we do it in different languages. It doesn't have to be in English all the time, because if you want to talk to those people who live far away in the villages and stuff like the rural areas, you have to, some of them are not educated. They can't speak English. So these has to be, we need to break it down.
That's right.
It has to be in English and in our local languages. So I'm expecting that you guys are going to do a program again, and the next time it has to be in Olof or in Mandinka or in Fula, because this is one program that is very important and useful to society. We need it, and there is no end to this because it's very big.
It is.
It is a very broad thing. There's no end to this. We can talk about this every day and we will not have an ending to it. And I really thank you, Mr. Mane, for this. I really appreciate you.
Thank you.
Yes, we'll come to that. I think, you know, one of our sequence or series will try and grab you. I'll get your number. I'll try and grab you to have you in here, and then so that we try and have you in the Wolof bit of it, you know, to be honest, to talk about the Wolof aspect of it, because my Wolof.
Are you trying to promote me, saying that I can speak Wolof? I can speak Wolof very.
Why déglu gis nga man suma Wolof bi is okay waaye Salifou
no waa ko ñu du dégg Wolof. Yeah. Yes, thank you.
Thank you so much.
Yeah.
I mean, and please, viewers, I would love you to go back to the beginning of the program and listen to it from the beginning to the end.
Yeah.
Because Salifou here has touched on very important points that we can learn from. You never know. Maybe there's abuser in your own home and you wouldn't even know.
Yeah.
And this is something that we have to really talk about. To be honest, guys, we need to talk about these things. We cannot keep saying, like the Olaf would say, it has to end.
Yeah.
Because look, like, there is an increasingly number of pedophiles in Gambia.
Yes.
I know that for a fact.
Oh, yes.
And why is that happening? It's because we want to keep quiet about it.
Absolutely.
Or we cannot disgrace the grandfather. We cannot disgrace the uncle. We cannot disgrace the brother. We cannot disgrace the father. You know, and this is wrong. Our kids are suffering. And these are the reasons why they cannot stay in marriages these days. Because they have been abused and we don't even know that they have been abused. And you touched on one point, that do these people even know they are being abused? So this is one area we need to sensitize on. This is one area we need schooling back on. This is one area we need to be educated again. Some people don't even know that they are being abused. Because, you know, I'll give you an example. A woman married, and now you're being abused. You go back to your family, and then they make you believe that the reason why you've been beaten up, or the reason why your husband is doing what he's doing to you, is because of you did wrong. This is the only way they can cover it up. They will tell you did wrong. So you end up believing that you did wrong. You will go and apologize to your husband and say, and then you will go to a friend and tell them that, oh, I deserve what my husband did to me because I was wrong. I didn't have to speak to him that way. No, nobody should be beaten up. Nobody should be abused.
That's right.
Nobody.
Thank you.
Yeah, so I'm so grateful that you guys are talking about it. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. Speak to you soon.
Thank you.
Thank you.
All right, thank you. Yeah, thank you. Bye. Salifou, on that note, we got very limited time now at the minute. What are your final thoughts before we go?
My final thoughts, you know, there's this perception in the Gambia that boys don't cry. And boys really are allowed to cry. We are allowed to cry. We can cry in private. We can cry in public. We should promote crying because crying is therapeutic. Crying is healthy. So when people are experiencing abuse and they want to come to somebody's house and cry a bucket full, they should be encouraged to cry. But in terms of tackling domestic abuse, some of the strategies that the UK government, for example, put together were around promoting awareness. That's top of the list. We need to promote awareness that domestic abuse is here. We don't want it to stay, and our aim is zero tolerance domestic abuse, and domestic abuse is everyone's business. Those two key messages need to filter through from local families, local communities, local schools, local churches, local mosques, local government, central government. The message, those two messages need to filter through so that it becomes a concerted effort. And if domestic violence is reported and there is strong evidence that there is domestic violence, there should be prosecution. And legislation needs to be stronger. If it was never there at all, if we are saying to the government, there needs to be a clear-cut legislation specifically related to domestic violence. And one of the other ways that domestic violence was promoted in this country it was to protect and support those who experience domestic violence. So again, there's some responsibility here for the local community and the local government, so that when people, local and central government, so that when people are experiencing domestic violence, they can have somewhere other than family members to turn to. Because sometimes family members would say, well, you have come to damage our family. We are not going to listen to what you are saying. What you are saying is rubbish. so we're not going to listen to you. But if there is an organization that's away from the family, that the person who is being abused or the abuser can go to and seek help, that's the kind of thing we should be promoting as well. We said it should be pursued and deterred. You know, these are some of the strategies that the government here put in place. So it should be pursued, it should be deterred. You know, that there needs to be that kind of campaign, and it should improve performance. We should empower people up to a point where they are able to speak about anything, not only domestic violence, but anything that's affecting family life can be brought to the open. So we need to educate people, we need to support people, we need to tell people whatever you talk about your family life, you are not the only person experiencing it. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 families in this village are experiencing what you have just said. So you are not alone, because sometimes people feel they are the only ones experiencing it. So they feel helpless. But domestic violence, those two messages is everyone's business. Domestic violence is zero tolerance. Boys are allowed to cry, and quite often the boys are the abusers. We need to shift that pattern and bring them into the discussion and say, look, the kind of abuse you are vetting on people, young people, women, your wife, your girlfriends, family members, etc., is affecting and paralyzing their future life. So you need to understand the magnitude of the problem you are causing now and how it can go long term to affect the child's behavior, how it can go long term to affect the child's success plans in life.
Thank you very much, Salif. On that note, we'd like to thank you all, all our viewers and listeners at the minute now at Sky Power FM Radio. I would love to urge you all to share this video, and then so that it go viral, pass the message on. Just share the video and then pass the message on. On that note, I would like to thank you all to all listeners now and the viewers at this minute. Salif Umane is the director of Mobe Mental Health Care in the Gambia. So he's here to help. If you have any other questions, you can send it on Sky Power FM here through the inbox, and then we'll see what we can do. I am Salif. We might promise to say maybe our next program.
Yes.
We try to say it in Mandinka and in our local languages.
That's right.
For the benefit of our local language listeners, that was a good observation, Pamata. On that note, thank you all for listening, and thank you for being there. Have a good night.
Here's an announcement from APS International Money Transfer and Services. At APS, we offer services such as money transfer, Nuga, Navecash, Power Top-Up, mobile phone credit top-up, as well as APS holiday cards. Send and receive money to the Gambia, Senegal, and across Africa from wherever you are on planet Earth. With our unbeatable exchange rate, you can transfer money up to £2,000 at the cost of 99 pence for transaction fee. Download APS application to access our 24-hour services at your convenience with privacy. Enjoy our hassle-free Nuga services with housing purchasing quality food items such as cooking oil, rice, sugar, and other daily provision for friends and families from their favorite shops and supermarkets in the Gambia. With our Nuga services, you can pay with deliver to the beneficiary across the Gambia at their convenience to their doorsteps at no cost. Also available at APS is our Nawe Cash Power Top-Up. Send cash power credit from any part of the world to the Gambia to friends and families to keep the lights on. All you need is a chosen cash power meter number to send it job done. With our mobile phone credit top-up, you can send a top-up or credit to your loved ones right away. With APS Holiday Cash, you don't need to worry anymore. With cash, you can withdraw cash from your debit or credit card, even if you are in up countries in the Gambia. Just get your card handy. Within minutes, your money will be ready for collection across the Gambia with no additional charges. For details or information, contact APS International on telephone landline number 0044-121-6433003. That's 0044-121-6433003. On our mobile WhatsApp number is 0044-790-4028180. That's 0044-790-4028180. APS International, simply the best.
Thank you so much for being there. This program is sponsored by APS International Approved Services Money Transfer.